Be inspired by the best sales professionals, sales leaders, and coaches in the world of B2B sales. From IT services, medical devices, through to coaching and consulting companies, these principles will help you accelerate your sales performance and growth. Using models from the best-selling book Inspire, Influence, Sell, and award-winning programs from Focus for Growth, you'll have the inside track on the psychology, skills, and systems used by the world's best sales teams. We'll hear from some of the best sales leaders from some of the fastest growing businesses in the world. They don't achieve record-breaking growth by chance. They have a proven sales and leadership approach and a laser focus on growth. You can hear exactly how they do it, one conversation at a time. This is the Inspire Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Lee. Welcome to this episode of the Inspire Sales Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest, Janice B. Gordon. Janice is the host of the Scale Your Sales podcast and has decades of experience in sales, customer success, leading sales teams, and managing her own business, and of course, her podcast. This episode, we talk not only about Janice's career, but also some principles for how Janice manages business, manages her life, and stays motivated. It's a really cracking episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Huge thank you for joining me on today's Inspire Sales Podcast. Janice, welcome to our discussion today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, pleasure's all mine, Janice. First of all, Janice, for anybody who's been perhaps hiding away and hasn't either seen you or heard from you, would you mind just giving us an introduction to who you are, what you do?
Yes, thank you. My name is Janice B. Gordon. Now, don't forget the B because I'm the only one in Google. Also known as the customer growth expert. Now, I'm recognized by LinkedIn Sales as one of 15 innovating sales influencers to follow. Wow. I'm also one of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers in customer experience, and like one of 150 B2B women thought leaders. I'm an international speaker, consultant, educator, and facilitator, and author of Business Evolution, Creating Growth in a Rapidly Changing World, and co-author of Heels to Deals, How Women Are Dominating B2B Sales. I started selling when I was 15. I didn't really understand there was a industry around how to sell, but it was kind of needs mercy and entrepreneurial. But I really started my proper sales training in the 1990s. And Justin, you've been on my podcast, Scale Your Sales, and we were talking about back in the day and everything. So I was in financial services, and I remember doing stand-up cold calling on a Tuesday, so we had to be in before 8 o'clock, and then on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock. I hated Tuesdays. I really did hate that. But it's where I learned how to sell, the traditions of how to sell. If we kind of fast forward, I did Cranfield MBA around 2000 and moved more into a COO role, working in construction industry and everything, and then moved into customer experience as a consultant for a customer experience agency. And this is where it completely, so I'd had a good kind of 12 years experience in sales, traditional sales. But when I went into customer experience, it really changed my perspective around selling and, Scale Your Sales framework, which is what I work with now. And I'm sure that will come out later on. So for the last 30 years, like you, I'm long in the tooth. I've worked in sales, customer experience, and leadership, and I help companies unleash hidden potential to accelerate revenue growth by closing the gap in their people, their processes, and the customer growth strategies.
Wow, there's some experience there, Janice, and for all of the achievements that you've had, the book writing, the recognition, the key clients, I know how much hard work has gone into that and how many years of experience. And when you say experience, it's always the the tried and tested methods, the things that work, the things that don't work, you know, that journey, I was going to say voyage and journey, the journey of discovery as you start to really refine your approach. It's really amazing. We are going to dig deep into some of these topics. And when you start to think about, you know, you made that transition from sales into kind of customer experience, customer success. Prior to that, you obviously had a lot of experience of growing sales. I'd love to hear, you know, in your sales roles, you said you talked about stand-up sales. Did you say stand-up? Did you say stand-up sales?
No, that would be nice. It's, you know, comedy club stand-up sales.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Maybe you ought to do something. No, when I was cold calling, we had to stand up cold calling. So that was on my Tuesdays, really. You know, so I was doing stand-up selling kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cold calling.
Wow.
Yeah. So what were you going to ask me?
No, so I'm going to take that nugget actually for anybody who's in a sales role today who perhaps hasn't heard about that theory. Tell us about the stand-up piece. Why was that important? What is that? And is that something that you, as you look back, you recognize that standing up and doing that was important?
I'm standing up now, you know,
So
when I do presentations, you know, to an audience, yes. I'm standing up. And I think it's really interesting about perspective, you know. So I was in Lithuania in May and speaking at a sales conference, and it was like 2,000 people in the audience. And when I look at the pictures now, I'm absolutely tiny. It was such a massive auditorium. But nevertheless, when I came out and was speaking to people over, you know, lunch and whatever, yes, people wanted to speak to me. I was the thought leader, the person with knowledge, because I had shared that. So there's a different dynamic in yourself and the perception of other people. You don't have to be on a big stage. Even now, the fact that our energy is different, we're projecting differently. So when you're standing up selling, you're coming across more confidently, and you're able to project your ideas and thoughts better. You can use your body as well, and especially we're in this kind of like little screen here, so I think it's more important to stand up than when you're in the room, because you actually need to put your body and your expression behind what you're saying. Well, I do anyway, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained it like that, Janice. I have exactly the same principle and same experience. So if ever I'm on a call with a customer, I tend to stand, and partly that's habitual because it's happened over time, but I've found that the energy is different. The way that you think and feel is different. There's almost your ability to react and respond is that much more enhanced. If anybody's listening and they're in sales roles and you're spending a lot of time seated, I'd really encourage you to, you know, practice this. Yeah. Have a go at standing for some sales conversations and see what difference it makes. But obviously there was, you know, early in your career, your organization, the company you were working for at the time, recognized the importance of being standing when you were having those conversations on a Tuesday. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So Janice, tell us in terms of growing sales then, you know, growing businesses, whether that be the business you're working for or your clients, what's your experience of growing sales?
So growing, my experience is twofold. So when we think of traditional sales, my experience of growing sales is counting numbers. That's traditional sales. You know, how many calls did you do? How many meetings did you have, and all of that. And I'm not saying that's unimportant. Fast forward where we are now, that doesn't necessarily get you more sales. There's no humanity in that, really. And so you can have a successful seller that has less calls, less meetings, but actually lands bigger deals. So, you know, what does that say? So is it in the numbers? No, it's not. It's actually, part of it's in the relationships, and part of it's actually understanding the environment your customers, your buyers are in, and what's important to them. And I very much talk about, it's not so much about pain points, and I hate these words, and I'm, you know, what keeps them up at night, you know, kind of like, forget that. It's really, that is very kind of marketing speak, and one of those throwaway sentences really that doesn't really mean very much. But what I'm talking about is understanding your customer's business and being a valid and valuable partner to that business. What are they really trying to achieve? How are they trying to achieve it? Who are the customers? What are the trends in their environment? What are the goals, you know, for the company? And then what are the immediate problems that they're trying to resolve? Who are the key decision makers? All of this information that you need to have, and much of that information you don't even need to speak to the customer. So when we're doing discovery and we're asking them 1,000 questions, this is just laziness on our side as salespeople. So, you know, what I'm seeing in sales is that the great salespeople do the research, understand the customer's environment, and actually take more of a consultative approach in not wanting to push and sell a product, but really wanting to help the customer to move to the next stage, whether that means it's a sale or whether it means that they're able to go into their company and have a conversation about how to save costs or how to move on to the next stage.
It's interesting that though, Janice, isn't it? Because it's a delicate balance, isn't it? You know, the research that you do about the customer and the market is really important. You have to be well informed to be credible, but you also need to make sure you don't make assumptions, because, you know, you will have been in the same situation as me. I'm sure people listening will have done as well, where you do some research, you go and talk to the customer and you say, oh, I saw this on your website. They go, oh, that's out of date. Actually, we know that's not part of what we do anymore. You think, oh, that's interesting. So it's that balance, isn't it, between being well enough informed so that you are credible in the conversation, but having the right approach so that you're asking the right questions, being interested enough in the customer and what they're really trying to achieve beyond your, you know, area of specialty in the sale that, you know, you're trying to make. Because at the end of the day, we are all trying to make sales, right? But from the customer's perspective, what's most important to them is their business and resolving, you know, issues that they might be facing or goals and, you know, objectives that they're trying to achieve. So, I mean, I'd be interested in your perspective on that balance.
Yeah, and you know, you're absolutely right. You do your research, but you've got to validate it, haven't you? You say,
yes,
you know, like I saw this, or I read this, or I went to a conference and this is what I heard Janice B. Gordon say. Is this relevant to you? So you know, but it's based upon something that you see. And yes, you do need to qualify it. And you may be introducing new things. Oh, really? What did she say? What was that about? And then you get into a natural conversation where you're actually sharing ideas. Well, you know, and that is more consultative, as opposed to when I was in the 1990s and I did all the fact finding and questioning. My questions were to lead people to my product. That's what my questions were, you know, and that's how I was trained.
Leading the witness, Your Honor.
I am leading the witness purposely, and the customer. The thing is, at that point, the customers didn't realize what I was doing. Customers are so much more informed now. Buyers are so much, they've heard it all before, and they, you know, and it really does you a disservice if you're still on that track. I do meet traditional sellers that are still on that track, and they all say to me, well, it worked for me in the past, so I'm going to stick with it. And so it's like, I don't want to kind of like see what's going on in the world and how things are changing. It's just like people do not want to sell virtually. Well, you're limiting your market, because it doesn't matter what you want. It matters what your customers want. And all of the stats are actually saying that buyers now do not want to interact with salespeople, and they're further down the decision-making line when they do want to interact, and they do not want you to pull them back into a fact find. They just want to get what they want in order to move on to the next stage. So you've got to be very much more sophisticated in your questioning to find out exactly what information they already have and what do they need to move on to the next stage, as opposed to get them into your sales process because they don't want to be there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that, isn't it? That perhaps, you know, the seller, a salesperson, is further back in the process in terms of where the buyer actually is, because they've got that much more information, they're that much better informed nowadays, and understanding and orientation of where's the buyer in their process, and meet them where they are, not where you think you should be. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that, Janice. That kind of, it's interesting because it kind of is like a misconception. I'd love to hear, is there a common misconception you see either with clients or you experience in the market regarding sales that you kind of disagree with, and what's your perspective on it?
Oh, I've got a few. I mean, one of my, you wouldn't expect any less, would you, just?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, right. So, so there is, and we can come back to it. There is some in terms of, what buyers expect and what they get in terms of, I think, is it Gartner or Forrester? I think it's Gartner did some research, and what the buyers said about the experience that they got. And the buyers said that it was probably 8%, that they were 8% satisfied with the buying experience. Yeah. And then when you talk to the sellers, they said that, they thought that they delivered an experience that was around 80%. So the misconception as to what you think you're delivering, the impression you think you're giving, the experience you think you're getting, to what actually is being received by the buyers and how they're interpreting it is vast, is absolutely vast, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is the language we use. And I've said this before, in that, in sales, we're very disrespectful, not only to the customers, but within our own teams and the language we use. And I remember there's, sales guru, I was having a conversation about being on the sales podcast, and they came back and said, how are you crushing sales, right? Or killing it. I hope you're killing it. I mean, all of this real macho language. And I wrote back, imagining my little voice, I'm not killing anything today or tomorrow. Thank you for asking. And then they kind of caught themselves and said, oh, sorry, I didn't, mean it like that. But we just throw out this language, whether it's, in our recruitment, we say, we want someone that's crushing sales and all of that. Well, I very much talk about diversity in sales and actually how that helps us to sales. And by the way, women are the better sellers. That's statistically correct.
Is it? So the evidence shows that women are more effective.
That women are 11% more likely to close deals than their male counterparts. Yeah, but there's other evidence. That's just one of several to kind of back that up. But yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 11% more likely to close a deal.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
But there's other language like close. I talk about the buyer experience prior to the customer experience. But when we use language like closing a sale, we're opening a relationship. We're not closing anything. And just words have power. The words that we use have real meaning. So you're telling internally people that this is the end. This is the end. Once we've done the sale, it's the end. This is closing something off. Well, actually, realistically, it's not the end, it's the beginning. So we need to start to interrogate the language we use within our teams when we're talking about our customers' leads. Leads? I mean, they're people, prospects, all of these language that we use, they've got... If we were taking them out of the sales environment and put them into another environment, people would think that we're crazy, we're brutal, we're inhumane.
Yeah.
They wouldn't they?
It's quite disrespectful, isn't it? The language is quite disrespectful.
Very disrespectful. So the misconception is that, around the language we use is okay. It's not okay. It's not respectful, even within our teams, and especially when we're referring to our customers. And I would like to see us change that. And guess what? When we change it in terms of our language, when we're recruiting, then that's going to bring in more of the diverse people that think, okay, I can sign up to that. I get that. I want to be part of that. This is a culture that, I really want to be a part of.
Do you know, it's really interesting you say that, Janice. A lot of that language would turn people off. Even, if I think about being a customer, or a client of somebody's and being referred to as a lead or a prospect, if you put yourself in the position of the customer, it doesn't sound very respectful, does it? And actually starting to talk about prospective clients and strengthening relationships, I completely agree. That term closing the sale, I always refer to it as gaining commitment to move forward, because it feels like it's the start of a journey rather than the end of a journey. You're absolutely right. But some of that language is interesting. I mean, I had was working with a client team recently. I think you'll completely relate to this as well. And we were talking about their sales team. So I was working with a sales management group. We were talking about their team and how they were struggling with some of the questioning and listening and trying to really discover what's the customer's core need. And as they were talking about it, they were saying, yeah, the team are really struggling with the pitching. And I kind of said, when you say pitching, what do you mean? They said, well, the questioning and listening and understanding the customer's needs. I said, and I was kind of, well, yeah, but you're calling it pitching. Pitching is not anything like questioning or listening or understanding the customer's needs. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The idea you get in your head is, I'm going to go in and talk at somebody. And it's really interesting. And there was a huge disconnect in the language that was being used relative to what they actually were trying to achieve with the customer. So you've got exactly the same experience. Some of these names and terms just don't facilitate or help people to really identify with what they're trying to achieve.
Exactly. You can imagine a leader in that situation talking about, pitching the sale. And so they may have said listening and they may have said questioning, but the seller, the sales professional, goes to the customer. And what do? They're pitching, they're talking at, because that's what they've been told to do. They're not going to pick up on all those little nuances. So it's really important that we start to investigate the language we use, because someone is going to interpret it as, you just told me to pitch. What's the problem?
Why are you now giving me a different instruction? It's so important, that clarity. And I find that a lot. I'm sure you do as well, that you get these mixed messages where people need that clarification. I think it's Seth Godin who says, a closed or sort of confused mind says no. So the minute you start confusing your people or you're confusing your customers, they're much more likely to either shut down or start putting in barriers or defensiveness in the face of what you're trying to achieve. So we have to get clarity right at the beginning of what is it we're trying to achieve. How do we make sure that everybody's clear on that and that the language supports it? Such an important principle.
I think that's absolutely right, Justin. And just understanding how our brains work, how much information we can retain. So when you give people more than 3 options, and if you're asking more than 3 questions, then that we can't cope with that in our brains, because is it the first one, the second one, or whatever. And so my mentor said to me, and that's a famous quote from somebody, but you only need to ask 3 questions to get all the information you need. The onus is on, and I do training of salespeople around this, the onus is on salespeople to construct their questions so well that it has clarity and it's succinct enough, but it actually gives you the information you want. So of course it needs to be an open question, but it it needs to be what I call a strategic searching question. So you will write it down and hone it and hone it and hone it, and then you'll be able to deliver it with clarity. And there'll be a flood of information that comes out of that if you choose your words carefully. But if you ask people 10 questions or 20 questions, they get bored and they think this will never end, and they answer the question briefly because they know there's going to be another question. But if you actually you say, look, I've only got 3 questions for you, and I'm going to ask you these 3 subjects, and you've constructed it so it's an open answer that comes back. And you say, I always tell people, ask permission to record the answer just so that I can focus on you rather than transcribing your answer. And I know we have, call all of that, call monitors and everything like that. But sometimes if you're in front of somebody, just say, do you mind me, because I know that you're going to give me a full response. Do you mind me just recording your response so I can take it back to my Teams, complaints, all of these things. You want it recorded so you can share it with your product teams and everyone else. So they think, oh, this is exactly what the customer is saying, or the buyer. This is the words they use to describe the problem. The problem they're having with you, the problem they're having internally, the problem with the product, the service, all of it. You want to get exactly the words they're using. Because remember, I said words have power. So the words they're using is the words you will also use to either in your marketing material, because customers get that, or in your success stories, or in your teams. This is the language you should be using. It's just the customer's language.
Yeah, wow, very good. And I completely agree. What if you're advising people to do that, Janice? Do you have a particular piece of tech they use or an app they use to record that response from a customer?
Well, there are, like that. There are so many, even now, like on Phantom, like there's so many apps, on Zoom that records conversations and calls, and there's so many companies that have that, and lots of sales team do. But if you're face to face, you've got a phone. Use your phone, and even now on the phones, when you record it, you can just get it transcribed and emails to you. The transcription. It's so clever, isn't it?
It's interesting. There's a couple of pieces of AI that I'm using at the moment that I found quite useful. The one on Zoom, there's a product called Fathom.
That's not Phantom. Fathom.
Fathom. Fathom. So if anybody's interested, Fathom will record your Zoom conversations and it will transcribe it. And so you'll get a summary afterwards. It's a really useful piece of tech. If you're in front of a customer, there's a product called Otter AI, OTTER, like the animal. The great thing about Otter, I'm not promoting it, but I use it, is that not only can you use it with customers, but you can use it if you're in the middle of something and you think, I just need to capture a thought. You can talk into Otter. It will record the actual voice note, and it will then transcribe it, and you can email it to yourself and do all that stuff. It's just so useful, and it's completely free of charge. I think you get 300 minutes a month free of charge. So it's these different pieces of tech that are now evolving are so useful in helping us to guide our thinking, customer thinking, clarify and capture information really accurately. It's such a great way to evolve your sales approach. So great tips there, Janice. Thank you. And
what you said about assumption, you mentioned that, we assume a lot, don't we?
We do.
If you're recording what other people are saying, you can't get away with assumptions,
No.
I got a really great tip yesterday. This was from Tom Castley. We were both on a webinar together.
Oh, yeah.
This is brilliant. This is not mine, but I'm using it. And what he says, that you need to record your conversations. We've got that. But then you put it in ChatGPT, and it will analyze the customer's questions. So sometimes we are not aware that there was a question in the customer's dialogue, but you get ChatGPT in order to analyze the questions. So there's lots of hidden questions. And what happens is that you realize actually there were 7 hidden queries and questions. When you look and analyze that, you can then see there were 3 questions around risk. So now I know this is what's important to the customer. Sometimes we're listening for what information we want to hear, but we're not actually listening for what information there is there. So if we get an independent party to analyze that transcription and tell us what was really there, then we can actually start to see what's important to the customer sentiment.
Wow. Yeah, I know Tom as well. He's a really good guy, actually.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, I must catch up with him. I really like the idea of that, recording the conversation, putting it into ChatGPT and analyzing those questions for themes or things that we're missing. Because you're right, we have our own preferences and interpretations, and sometimes that blinkers us to what's actually being said or being expressed by the customer. Yeah, I really like that. And it's interesting because I'm using ChatGPT a different way, but I talked about Otter AI. When I create articles and content, I will record it on Otter AI, then take the kind of bulk text, put it into ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT to structure it as an article. And it's all those different things that you can start to use AI just to shortcut and improve your efficiency and your time as a seller or a business person. It's so important to find these nuances, because if you're still doing things the long way round, actually this is a way to really speed up your processing and start to get some of those insights. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Janice. Really good, really good. So to Janice, you shared some great stuff so far. If you think back in your career, I'm interested. This is a question I ask myself quite a bit, actually. What advice would you give your younger self, the younger Janice starting out?
So I was, when I was 15, you know, we all had those careers advisors, and my careers advisors said that I wasn't intelligent enough to do A-levels.
Wow.
And so it was a bit of a knockback, but I still did A-levels. I just had to go between two different schools because that meant he blocked me going into the sixth form. And, you know, I've got a Cranfield MBA. I'm probably more qualified than he is. But, you know, so the advice that I would give myself, and, you know, eventually I found my way, and I spoke about this in my, when I did a TEDx, is that the advice that other people give you is based upon their historic experience. Now, this was, you know, a man that had no idea of my life and my experience, but yet he was giving me advice. Well, he was assessing me based on my color, but, you know, he was, you know, there are often people in your lives, so especially when you're younger and they're older people, even your parents that want to keep you safe and love you, right? Everything, all people are doing is sharing their experience when they're advising you. But the experience is based on their historic life experiences. Now, I'm kind of planning something, or I've got an aspiration, or I'm saying I want to do this. This is based on my future self. And what often happens, even our parents that may love us, they want to keep us safe. And they, you know, we're all scared of the unknown. So here I am going out into the future, and I'm now taking someone's advice that's based on their historic experience about how I should go out into the future. So what I would say to myself is to understand that people's advice is based on their historic experience. And then if their life plan or life history has nothing to do with yours, the advice they give has nothing to do with you as well. So do not take people's advice and use that as your source of information going forward. It's just that I know that there's lots of things that stopped me in my path because I thought, or I was given the impression that they knew better. But when you understand where advice is coming from, you realize actually no one knows better. No, advice is about advising you about something in the future and the present, but how no one can see into a crystal ball. So no one really knows. So now I understand that, and I kind of share that with a lot of people. It's almost a freeing to just do what you think. There isn't a right or a wrong. You've just got to go out, be brave, and just do it. And then by doing it, you'll know. So I really wished I had that release and that freedom, and not have the hang-ups to think, oh, this person said I shouldn't, should I? And the battle with myself. And I really do believe I probably would have been further ahead, you know, had I not had all of those barriers that were holding me back, because they're placed in my head. They're little seeds in my head. So yeah, that's what I would say to my younger self, and that's what I say to younger people now, to realize where that advice is coming from. And, you know, thank you. I choose to refuse much of it and accept little of it.
Wow. It's so interesting, that, isn't it? That, because you're right, it's that person's experience. It's also their limitations of their own beliefs and their own plans going forward. If somebody has a plan for themselves in the future that is incremental or is, restricted, they will project that onto other people because, and not for anything other than it's their view of the world. So that's what they believe. And if someone believes something, then it's really difficult for them to be able to communicate or articulate anything else other than that. And they're projecting their beliefs onto you. You're absolutely right. It's such an important principle to understand in our lives, isn't it? And I mean, kudos to you, Janice, to having had that experience and then having made those investments in yourself, recognizing that you have greater capability than that and going on to achieve, a lot of things that you felt were important for you. And who knows, right? The future from here on in, there's still so much more that you're going on to do, right?
Absolutely. Do you know what? When I pop my clogs, I want to be completely wrung out. I really do believe that we're here. Like I'm not sure about purpose being the big bang, whatever, but we're all here for a reason. Our DNA says that we're uniquely different, and so we have to give it all away, give everything away. All of us, as soon as you get knowledge, knowledge is useless unless you share it. Share the knowledge, give it away, be absolutely wrung out, use and abuse your body. I mean, you've got to look after it so it lasts, but like you've got to be absolutely ready to go and run it completely wrung out, because you've given everything away, you've shared the knowledge, you've experienced as much in life, you've really kind of like taken yourself to the limit, mentally, physically, everything. And I think that's why we're here. So yeah, I'm coming up to a significant birthday, and I am going to have so much fun. Honestly, I'm literally going to be outrageous because I've got permission to do it. And, and I just urge everyone to kind of live their life to the full and just give it all away, because it's pointless keeping it and saving it and, all of that, and enjoy it.
Yeah, well, you look great for 21, Janice. You've achieved a lot. You've achieved a lot at your young age. Well done.
Thank you for that, Justin. You can come again.
Brilliant. Hey, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Janice. Final question. The climate at the moment, the economic climate is really interesting. Some businesses, some teams are thriving. Others are starting to feel that tightening in the market. The economic cycle seems to be changing. We're hearing a lot about pressure on consumers, and spending and all sorts, and interest rates are increasing. It's a difficult time, I think, certainly in the UK market, and other markets are starting to feel that same pressure. As we go through those more difficult times, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you motivate yourself and your team through those more difficult, challenging periods.
I think, like when I don't listen. Pandemic, I stopped listening to news, and it's I'll get a little tidbit, but if I want information, I go looking for it. So rather than have all of that negativity on tap, and including social media, I don't have any alerts, notifications. When I want something, I have to go in and look for it. Right. So I think focus, it's really important to focus on what's important to you, and to kind of have that really clear goal. So goal for the year, a goal for the day as well. There's and that is kind of like focus on the one thing. What is the one thing I want to achieve today? So that's what I say to my teams. What is the one thing that you want to achieve today? Once you've done that one thing, you're going to feel great. And you're probably going to do 2 or 3 or 4 things, but you'll feel great about your day. And that one thing is like, is this going to help me achieve my overall goal? Is it move, just like your customers, I said, you only want to give them enough information to move them on to the next stage. So is this going to do enough to move me on one step further, closer to my goal? I'm not wasting my time on things that are not going to help me to achieve those goals. So you've got to have clarity around that. I remember listening to Oprah, and Trevor Noah asked her, with all the people that you've interviewed, what is the one thing that creates the success? And she said they all have a burning goal and real clarity around what that is. And that's what we all need. What is your key thing? And you measure everything against that. Will this move me forward? And what's the one thing I'm going to do today to help me move forward? So regardless of what's happening in the world, you know what? Buyers still need to buy. Right. So we can get hung up about, the interest rates and what's happening with the economy, but buyers still need to buy. We still need to go out and do, live our lives. So it might be that the decision-making teams are larger. It might be the process, the sales cycle is longer. But the thing is, at the end of the day, they still need to buy. So the onus is on you to focus on what is the most compelling, the most priority need, and how you can help them fulfill that need. So whether it's within me, within my team, or what I may be doing for asking sales team to do for their customers, is exactly the same. It's understanding what your customer's key goal is and helping them to do the one thing that's going to enable them to move forward. So you can still use this same process with your customers by getting them to focus and to have clarity.
I really like that. Yeah. So you're kind of cutting out the noise and really focusing in on what's the priority for the customer, what's the priority for you, and how do you stay on track to achieve that one single really important goal, because that's what's going to keep you energized, motivated, and moving forward. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think the overriding thing in terms of my personality, if it's not fun, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not doing it. Life is too short. So, but within that, okay, what I am doing, I'm being focused.
Yeah. I like that. And it's interesting, because I think as you get a bit more experience in life, it becomes a bit easier to make those choices and say, actually, I'm only going to do the things that really light me up, that I really enjoy. And anybody listening that's perhaps thinking, yeah, that would be a nice position to be in, it's interesting. If you start to make those decisions, it's amazing how that becomes a way of thinking, and actually you can start to achieve the things that you enjoy and are important for you and people around you. So yeah, really good insight, really nice kind of way to close our conversation today, Janice. Janice, thanks so much for joining me. And just before we finish, I'd love to kind of just direct listeners to some of your resources. So absolutely check out Janice's podcast, Scale Your Sales Podcast. Obviously, I've been on, but Janice has some amazing guests on there. Janice, where else can people find you? Where's the best place to kind of connect with you or get in touch?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, Janice B. Gordon. Yeah. Make sure when you connect, you say that you listen to myself and Justine on the podcast. So because obviously on LinkedIn you get a lot of people that connect and sell, so it's great to know the source. So yeah, LinkedIn is the best source, or scaleyoursales.co.uk website, which is where you'll find the podcast. And for speaking, my name, janicebgordon.com.
Fantastic. Janice, thanks so much for sharing your experience so openly with our listeners today. And thanks for just being, such a great person. I really, really enjoy our conversations. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Thanks for joining us today, and wishing you every success and your clients every success in the future.
Thank you. I've loved it.
Pleasure. Thanks, Janice. Take care.
Genuine thanks for listening to the Inspire Sales Podcast. We hope you enjoy learning some of the most cutting-edge sales techniques and getting close to some of the greatest sales leaders in the world now and in the future. If you'd like to explore further, please feel free to visit our website, focusforgrowth.co.uk. And if you'd like to take our Sales Acceleration Scorecard and discover your sales and influencing score, then check out the show notes for the link in the bio. If you have enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button. If you know people in your sales and leadership network that you think would like to listen to, then please share this episode with them. I'd be very grateful. If you'd like to get in touch with me, please feel free to do so. If you have suggestions for further guests, or if you'd like to appear yourself, please contact me or my team. You can connect with me. I'd love to hear from you. My social profiles are in the show notes, and I look forward to being with you on the next episode. Thanks again for listening. See you soon.